over the winter, I refurbished some old ski chairs, old two-seater ski chairs. So here are some of the finished chairs, 3 of them. In total, I've done around 20 of these chairs. Ended up cutting off the post and plugging it and redoing all the wood in it. And we're going to hang them, so they were drilled here and up here for a set of chains. And when I went out to buy eye bolts for the chains, all they had were bolts that were too long for the hole. So I had to, and I did quite a few chairs, so I had to make a jig. Well, I didn't have to, but I made a jig to cut off the bolts in kind of a precise way. So the bolts installed here, and they needed to be just long enough for the nut, and I used these nylon lock nuts and cinch it up, and I had to finish the end so it wasn't sharp. And you know, when you cut off a bunch of bolts, you end up with a burr on the end. So I'm going to show you the couple of jigs that I made to accomplish this. So basically, the 2 jigs are just right here. This one for cutting, and this one for finishing the end. So I started out with a block of wood. These are already made, so I'm not going to make them over again. Drilled a 1/4 inch hole because these are quarter 20 bolts, and on this thing was just a piece of scrap, and drilled through the end like so. I headed over to the chop saw and just removed the corner off of this one right here. 45 degrees. I didn't do much experimenting, but 45 degrees worked pretty good for this setup, and I cut it down not too far from the top. I probably could have gone a little deeper, but I didn't. At the bandsaw, I have a flag on it that drops down, let me know the blade tightener's on. Also, I have this, which is a push stick that has a magnet embedded in the handle that lets me know the blade's not tight right there, so I don't start it up with the blade slack. I set up on the hole like this, and then started the saw and cut through to that position and backed it out. And that cut the 1/4 inch hole right in half and left a little bit down below. I also drilled a couple holes here just because I didn't want this to crack. I wanted for alignment. I didn't want this this hinge or whatever you're going to call that to break. And here's how it's put together. Oh, by the way, I cut a hole up here after the fact, and you'll see why in a minute. Here's the screws I put down into to secure the hinge. This piece right here is meant to be the chopping block. So I'm gonna, I lined it up and I only attached it to 1/2 of this jig. So. And pretty much there it is. The way this jig works is that the bolt goes through, and if you just squeeze it in there, it locks it in, and then you can just cut it right off. I used a 32 tooth per inch good quality hacksaw blade. And that is the jig right there. And this was the length. Actually, it wasn't the length. I had a shim in the back. But I suppose you could use this for any length if you just made a shim for the back. The jig would work, or, I mean, you could modify this any of a number of ways. This piece is oak. So here's how it works. You drop it in. I ended up putting some tape on here to keep this thing just solid into this position as I went through and cut all the bolts off. And so here's the bonus pro tip that I use. One is it's always good to lubricate the blade if you know, it just makes things go better. I had bought some of this a long time ago. I don't use it much but I use it when I drill and cut metal. And here's what I found to be really helpful. This little container came from, my wife bought something a long time ago. I don't know, she uses things like this. Truth serum is what this is called. It's a really good thing to have around the drill press, and it just puts a small amount of oil onto drill bits and things, and the delivery system for that is fantastic, and it's not a big giant unwieldy tube. So here we go, let's cut. The block on the top of the jig keeps the jig from falling out of the vise when I loosen it to remove the bolt. So I had the length set. You squeeze that, it's nice and tight. Whoop. See, it has to be out of the vise. And there it is, it's chopped off. So at this point, it's a little bit snarly to be, you know, to have, it's got a burr on the end. So now we're gonna tune that up. Over here, this block. I used a fine single cut flat file to do it. If I had a finer file in a half round, it might have been a better choice, but I didn't have one. But anyway, that was it. It was quick and effective and got the job done. And that was it right there. It's tuned up. The final thing I did is I have this block of hard rubber, and I don't think I used that piece of sandpaper, but I used a piece of sandpaper or an old sanding belt, and just dress the end a little bit. And there's the results right there.